Social norms are unwritten rules that govern the way that people behave within a society or group. These norms provide stability in the long run, preventing the society from decaying into chaos and ensuring that even monumental change happens slowly. But they also strongly influence individuals to conform to society. For instance, one study in the 1950s showed this very clearly. New students at a university were randomly assigned to live among either conservative students or liberal students. The researchers observed that these new students gradually adapted their values and beliefs over time to fit the norms of their surroundings. Other studies have shown that people followed group norms even when they had direct evidence that contradicted the norm. For example, in one study, people were asked to estimate the length of a line drawn on a piece of paper. People's estimates followed a group norm even in cases when people could see with their own eyes that the group was wrong. Social norms often stifle creativity in groups. To the extent that creativity is the result of thinking outside the box, groups do not normally reward creative individuals, but instead ignore them or even push them out of the group completely. This often works to the detriment of many businesses who strive to attract creative talent to their organization only to see them become unproductive under the pressure of conformance to norms.
Not only businesses, but also educational systems suffer from this institutional tendency. The science advisor to the Japanese government, Kiyoshi Kurokawa, declared to the Chronicle of Higher Education, "I am almost exploding at the way the university system bangs down the nail that sticks up." He further complains, "Our young people are not being allowed to excel." One way to encourage creativity and overcome the influence of social norms can be taken from a study by Adaves Yorno et al., 2006. In one part of the study, they asked two groups of participants to create posters and subtly gave each group a norm about words and images. For one group, the importance of words was emphasized, while for the other group, the importance of images was emphasized. The researchers also heightened the participants' group identity by emphasizing their group membership. Afterward, the two groups judged a leaflet provided by the researchers, which consisted of 90% images. In their judgments, participants equated creativity with following the group norm. The words group rated the leaflet as less creative than the images group did. A second part of the study, with different participants, was similar to the first, but the participants' individual rather than group identity was heightened. As a result, the participants' judgments were the opposite. Creativity was perceived as being inconsistent with the group norms. Music can evoke a wide variety of strong emotions, including joy, sadness, fear, and peacefulness or tranquility, and people cite emotional impact and regulation as two of the main reasons why they listen to music. Music can produce feelings of intense pleasure or euphoria in the listener, sometimes experienced as thrills or chills down the spine. Musical pleasure is closely related to the intensity of emotional arousal. Even opposite emotional valences, for example, happy or sad, can be experienced as pleasurable, and listeners often report that the most moving music evokes two or more emotions at once. Music does not have the clear survival benefit associated with food or sex, nor does it display the addictive properties associated with drugs of abuse. Nonetheless, the average person spends a considerable amount of time listening to music, regarding it as one of life's most enjoyable activities. Many believe that music has special mystical properties and that its effects are not readily reducible to a neuronal or neurochemical state. Advances in cognitive neuroscience have challenged this view, with evidence that music affects the same neurochemical systems of reward as other reinforcing stimuli. In one of his dark moments, Pascal said that all man's unhappiness came from a single cause, his inability to remain quietly in a room. Diversion, distraction, fantasy, change of fashion, food, love, and landscape. We need them as the air we breathe. Without change, our brains and bodies rot. The man who sits quietly in a shuttered room is likely to be mad, tortured by illusions and introspection. Some American brain specialists researched the brains of travelers using X-rays. They found that changes of scenery and awareness of the passage of seasons through the year stimulated the rhythms of the brain, increasing a sense of well-being. Monotonous surroundings and tedious regular activities wove patterns which produced fatigue, nervous disorders, apathy, self-disgust, and violent reactions. It's hardly surprising, then, that a generation protected from the cold by central heating, from the heat by air conditioning, carted in clean transports from one house or hotel to another, should feel the need for journeys of mind or body, or for the exciting journeys of music and dance. We spend far too much time in shuttered rooms. Children need paths to explore, to take bearings on the earth in which they live, as a navigator takes bearings on familiar landmarks. If we search the memories of childhood, we remember the paths first, things and people second, paths down the garden, the way to school, the way around the house, corridors through the long grass. Tracking the paths of animals was the first and most important part of early humans' education. The late Katharine Graham, the first female CEO of a Fortune 500 company, once said, "To love what you do and feel that it matters, how could anything be more fun?" Ms. Graham, who guided the Washington Post Company for decades with her passion for quality journalism, was ahead of her time in many ways. But her insights about how meaningful work brings joy to life date back to ancient Greece. In the 4th century BC, Aristotle wrote that people achieve eudaimonia, a contented state of flourishing, when they fully use their unique talents, thereby fulfilling their basic function in life. In the 20th century, the psychologist Abraham Maslow restated the concept as self-actualization, which he placed at the top of his hierarchy of human needs. Most recently, academics in the field of positive psychology have underscored the link between meaningful activities and happiness. Meaning is the motivation in your life. It's finding what engages you, what makes your heart beat faster, what gives you energy and creates passion. Meaning enables you to push yourself to the limits of your capabilities and beyond. Without meaning, work is a slog between weekends. With meaning, any job can become a calling. By deploying your greatest strengths in service of a meaningful purpose that transcends everyday goals, you open yourself up to long-lasting happiness. Meaning is a defining characteristic among female leaders. When asked what the most important factors are in choosing a job and staying in it, women consistently cite the meaningful elements of the work. Women like Amina Susanna Agbaje, who started her own law firm to fulfill a childhood dream, have a profound belief in what they are doing. That leads to a higher level of commitment and gives you the courage to plunge ahead, no matter what the odds and no matter who says, "No, you can't." Finding meaning helps you set audacious goals and venture forth to meet them.
An important difference between persons and other creatures is that only persons can be morally responsible for what they do. When we accept that someone is a morally responsible agent, this typically involves more than holding a particular belief about him. It entails a willingness to adopt certain attitudes toward that person and to behave toward him in certain kinds of ways. Imagine, for example, that you return home one evening and find your treasured Waterford vase shattered on the dining room floor. Discovering that the vase has been purposely shattered by a malicious houseguest will give rise to a set of reactions much different than those which would seem appropriate were you to discover that the vase had been accidentally toppled from the shelf by your clumsy cat. In the latter case, you might feel regret and perhaps even anger at your cat, but you would hardly feel the same sort of resentment and moral indignation that would seem warranted had your guest intentionally broken the vase in order to hurt you. Moreover, it would be appropriate to blame your guest and to hold him responsible for the misdeed in a way much different from the way in which you might discipline your cat and try to train him not to climb on the furniture in the future. Of course, to make these claims is not to deny that there is one sense in which both the guest and the cat are responsible for breaking the vase in the respective scenarios. Each is causally responsible. Each plays a causal role in bringing about the destruction of the vase. But whereas both persons and non-persons can be causally responsible for an event, only persons can be morally responsible. For many people, questions of moral responsibility are associated primarily with wrongdoing, like that described in the preceding example. According to this view, questions concerning who may legitimately be held responsible are seen to stem from more practical questions concerning who should be blamed and punished for their misdeeds. Similarly, a concern to understand the propriety of our responsibility ascriptions is driven mostly by a concern to understand what justifies the punitive measures we take toward those who injure us and violate the norms of society. Such a view helps to give expressions such as, "I am going to hold you responsible," or "I promise to find out who is responsible for this," a mostly negative connotation, calling to mind the retributive attitudes and harsh treatment that await wrongdoers. In contrast to this approach, however, others take a broader view of moral responsibility. They associate responsibility not only with negative responses like resentment and blame, but also with more positive responses such as gratitude, respect, and praise. To see the intuition behind this view, imagine that you once again return home after work. This time, instead of finding a shattered vase, you discover that your neighbor's exceedingly ugly tree, which had long blocked the otherwise spectacular view from your living room, has been knocked down. As in the previous examples, your reactions will vary depending upon what you subsequently learn about the causes that led to the tree's demise. For instance, your reaction would presumably depend on whether the tree's uprooting was the result of a fortuitous gust of wind or the efforts of your considerate neighbor who removed the eyesore as a birthday surprise for you. In the former case, you might feel fortunate or happy, but you would hardly feel the gratitude and desire to praise that would seem appropriate had your thoughtful neighbor torn down the offensive tree just to please you. The point stressed by the proponent of the broader conception of responsibility is that there is a spectrum of reactions, including positive reactions, that are appropriately applied only to persons.